Hi again, everyone. So I had previously made my sort of first life story video, and I left a bunch of stuff out, so I realized that I had to kind of make another one. Last video had the birds, and this is, I don't really keep a lot of stuffed animals, but this is Nekobus from the movie My Neighbor Totoro. So anyway, this is gonna be my petting prop for the video. In the last video, I mentioned that I was abused as a child, but I also really want to make it clear that I don't regret that. You know, the things that happen in your life sort of affect the person you become and the things that you experience. And while what I'm about to tell you, of my current life is like not necessarily desirable, it's good enough and I'm content with it, and so I don't necessarily ever think about changing it. I mean, I guess things would have been better if my childhood and teenage years weren't the way they were, but I actually don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I don't hate my parents. I just think that they're like ill-equipped, and I, never felt like it was a slight against me. Like I never felt like I was actually bad or anything like that, because I really wasn't. And some people just shouldn't have kids. But anyway, I also mentioned in the last video how I ended up dealing with my boyfriend's death anxiety. Death anxiety is basically fear of death, but it's a severe panic disorder. So imagining, that you're panicking like 24/7 about death, like not even that you're about to die, but that you will die. And so when that happened, like I said, I've never been the kind of person to be anxious or depressed or anything like that. Like not like chronically depressed, and I had never really been too anxious except when I was a teenager, but whatever. So about 2 years ago, I had a really strange experience while meditating. Back then, I also used to smoke, and I'm not talking about cigarettes. And that was, that went fine for a year, and I definitely don't regret it. However, one day I was meditating, and I was in a really weird, zealous mood, and I think that I had just kind of focused my energy in a really weird way, and so I had this like really strange experience while meditating, and it freaked me out, and so I sort of panicked, and my heart rate went up really high, and so high that, well, basically, like, if your heart is working super, super fast, it's consuming a lot of oxygen, and what your body will do is take the blood away from your extremities. It makes you feel weak. And then if it also increases, like if it gets worse, it can, stop sending as much blood to your eyes and things like that, parts of your brain, so you can start like kind of blacking out a little bit. So that happened, and I went to the ER. And they didn't really do anything for me. The ER kind of sucks, especially if you don't have insurance. And I had just sort of waited it out, and I felt like I was dying. I really felt like my heart was going to race until it exploded, and I just wasn't going to be able to hold on. But eventually it just kind of went away, and I left the ER and returned home. After that I was fine, and about, I don't know, a few months later, I was coming home from a restaurant and was driving the car, and suddenly I had like this really huge, weird palpitation. It felt like my heart had turned into like a jelly ball, just go like that, just it was like the strangest sensation, and it really freaked me out. I'm not a particularly fearful person, but that did remind me, well, I mean, it kind of harkened back to the fact that I've always had worries about my heart. Like I've had several Holter monitors, EKGs, things like that, just because I would get like skipped beats, or I don't know, sometimes my heart would race. get palpitations, and doctors are like, well, that happened, and they don't really explain why. So when this happened, I was really freaked out, and I stayed freaked out for a long time, and I knew that I needed to see somebody, but of course there weren't really a whole lot of answers. And then in retrospect, I don't know what happened here, and I've seen a lot of doctors about this, and no one can really pin it a reason on it, but I think that I just kind of got so bent out of shape about it that I really threw my body out of whack just through worrying and being really tense and anxious about my heart. I think I also have a hormonal imbalance, and I've never really met a doctor who can properly treat it. So what began to happen is that I would start to get really flushed. I would feel like my head was swelling and hot and tight. My throat always felt like somebody was pushing on it. And then about 4 times a day, my heart would just start pounding really fast. And this went on for months, and I tried to figure out what it was. I worked for a naturopath at the time, and I had them do nutritional panels on me, draw blood on me, try to see if I had any problems. And there, a couple of minor things came back, but nothing really fixed it. So I kept on with this, and it was so stressful. I was agitated and tense and fearful all the time. I was like constantly freaking out. So when I came home, I would just go to sleep because like it was way easier to just be unconscious. When I was up, I would just suffer like this tension and this weird swelling in my head, and there was just nothing physical. I mean, I even had a doctor listen to my heart, and she's like, no, everything, sounds fine. So it was just kind of a mystery, which is, it's so frustrating. For a while, I stopped meditating just because I started to get meditation anxiety. Like, as soon as I kind of felt myself slipping to a different plane, I would just freak out, what can happen to me? Is something weird going to happen with my energy? Am I going to freak out? So I freak out about thinking about freaking out. And this went on for months and months and months. It got gradually worse, and then over time, I guess I sort of got used to it. In the meantime, I was working at this office. The thing about me is that I've always been into non-traditional healing, like using herbs, and when I was younger, I was sort of obsessed with the idea of shamanism, and that's sort of come back into my life in some aspects, which I don't know, I may or may not talk about later. But in the meantime, I was always very medically inclined, scientifically inclined, and so I've always worked in doctors' offices, and I started going to school for alternative medicine because I wanted to help people in that way, although it turned out that my school was a diploma mill, and the education was really not on par with what they were asking, so I had to drop out. And I might go to school for massage therapy. There's a very cool sort of like alternative massage therapy school where I live. So anyway, I was working for this alternative medicine doctor, and I quit my job at an oral surgeon's office to work there. And I was making a lot of money at the oral surgeon's office. I would also make a lot of money at the naturopath's office, but I had to take a pay cut to do it, and I didn't hesitate because I was like, I've always wanted to work for somebody who does well by people, that really helps heal them in a way that I agree with, and so this just seemed like a great idea. It wasn't. It was terrible, and I hated it, and the doctor was kind of, he was very good at what he did, but he was really in it for the money, and that hurt me. I can't work for somebody who lies to people. I can't work for somebody who, through their business policy, turns a lot of people away. The people that would come to this doctor have been to every other doctor for their problem and not had help, and they're desperate and in need of healing, and he was so expensive that so many of them couldn't come, and I had to be the person who talked to them on the phone, and they're miserable, and they're sad, and they're hurting, and they're suffering, and that's a very difficult thing to deal with. And on top of that, he was kind of a man-child. But anyway, So it was terrible, and it was really stressful, and it was frustrating. It's hard to work for somebody who's not logical when you're a very rational person. And so the stress of it all just kind of made me wish that I started looking for another job. And by the time, well, after like 6 months, that crazy sort of head swelling had gone away. There was still some throat tension, and I really couldn't make that go away, but I would, like drink hot tea, and I drank a lot of chamomile tea and calming teas and things like that to relax myself. So then as I mentioned to you, I do meditate. I tend to follow a lot of Buddhist tenets in my life. And I am also interested in Hinduism, like some aspects of it. And I had a book of mantras, and I started to recite a Kali mantra. And I'll show you what I recited that on in another video, because I do plan on doing an ASMR video about my malas. So I recited this mantra for just like 3 days. And on the third day, now let me explain. The mantra, Kali as an entity, as a force of change, is unrelenting and not delicate, but she does make these rapid changes in your life. If you are asking to, be made a better person, things may become immediately disruptive and chaotic in your life. She's kind of like a storm that just blows through, and everything negative just gets crashed away. And of course, I'm not in believing that this is like an actual deity, but when you're using mantras, you're focusing your intent on like a specific energy. And I think that a lot of times in religions, especially in the types of Buddhist religions that do have deities, when you talk about Tara and things like that, they're not actually worshiping, like they don't actually think that there's this, god or goddess like lurking about, but it's this sort of sacred energy, this specificness that they are kind of summoning. So anyway, I recited this Kali mantra for 3 days, and on the morning of the 4th day, I was fired from my job. I've never been fired before. And I just sort of laughed. I was like, wow, I hated this job. This is what I did not explain. The mantra was specifically to remove blocks and difficulties, obstacles from your life. And the biggest thing that I was struggling with at that time was that job. I hated it. I was really looking for another job, but it was far away from my home. I didn't have time to drive around and things like that. So I got fired, and in the meantime, the sort of tension and anxiety that I was experiencing had gone away. And so that was a revelation. But after a couple of months, I woke up one morning. Actually, I had been having some strange dreams, which, that's not really remarkable in my life. But one day my boyfriend and I were working out in the house, and I felt this like cold feeling in my chest after I was almost done, and it really worried me. And it really shouldn't have. That's not really a symptom of anything acute, super dangerous. But as I mentioned, I do have that fear that there's something wrong with my heart. So I was really unsettled, and we were supposed to go take care of some errands, and I just really couldn't calm down. I was just worried about it. I started shaking. I was so tense. I tried to relax, take deep breaths, but my heart was starting to race. I was just really nervous about it. And so my boyfriend arranged, he had to go to work, and I didn't think that anything was wrong, but I was so worried that I needed a doctor to tell me, that I was okay. Now, mind you, I'm not employed and I don't have insurance at this point, so I had to go to the ER, and we arranged for somebody to take me. And they did tests, and everything looked okay. The doctor at the ER asked me, though, if you're having chest pains, have you ever been tested for sickle cell? And I said no. I don't have a family history because my mother is adopted, and I was not raised with my my biological father. So they did the tests and everything else, like the metabolic panel and such, came back fine. And I went home, and then the next day, or like a couple of days later, I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning with this really strange, dropped, hollow, empty feeling in my chest. And I didn't know if it was because I, had stopped breathing, had my heart stop for a second, and that woke me up. I didn't know, and I really, I was like, well, I'm here now, and I'm alive, and, obviously, I didn't stop breathing forever. My heart didn't stop, but I was so worried, and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I started shaking more and more and more, and I was really freaking out and starting to feel like really hollow and tense in my chest, and my heart started pounding. I tried to eat because maybe I thought my blood sugar was low, and I couldn't hardly eat. My mouth was dry. And as I started to freak out, more and more about it, I felt like, my arm was cold and numb, and I really, really needed to go to the ER. And my boyfriend, really tried to calm me down. He's like, you're just having anxiety. And I really couldn't believe that because I had never had panic attacks before. I didn't really understand how or why that could happen. So I just, was crying a lot, and I was just like, why is this happening to me? I don't understand why this could happen to me. But we went to the ER, and everything was fine. They gave me some anxiety medication and everything. Actually, here's the thing. By the time that I went to the ER, I was experiencing chest pains, really tight, chest pains that would get stronger and stronger, and I thought I was going to die. The chest pains came with waves of nausea. I was sweating, I was feeling hot and cold, my arm was numb, and I was like, these are the symptoms of a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack, and I'm only 26 years old. But when they gave me the anxiety medication, everything went away, and I knew that it had been anxiety, and I was so confused. I didn't know why I would suddenly start having terrible anxiety. I went back to the ER one more time because I was having weird headaches, and I had an MRI just to make sure I didn't have a brain tumor, because like I said, I had just turned into this hypochondriac. And after that, I started to get a little better because I knew, okay, well then there's nothing wrong with me, except I couldn't exercise for a long time. I was still afraid of getting my heart rate up. I saw a cardiologist. I got an echocardiogram. I had a stress test, an exercise stress test, and I had him listen to my heart. And I had an EKG, and everything came back fine, but I just really couldn't, I couldn't exercise. And I've started to exercise. I still have some difficulty because what would happen is I began to be in the state where I was constantly hearing and feeling my heartbeat, and it was pounding a lot. And so I couldn't really do anything. I was constantly monitoring my heartbeat, making sure it wasn't getting too fast or too hard. So where I'm at now is I want to touch on something. I have hypnagogic sensations a lot. And so what happens is sometimes at night, when I'm falling asleep, I feel like I'm dying. I feel like either my heart is stopping, or I just get this sudden feeling that I'm dying, so I wake up. And it's not really something that I'm consciously doing, but it's just, if you look up hypnagogia, sometimes your body interprets the sensations of falling asleep and the paralysis as like a sudden death. I was getting a little bit of exploding head syndrome. I sometimes hear voices when I'm falling asleep, which is the easiest symptom of hypnagogia. I get stuck a lot between waking and sleep with the hypnagogia. I get a lot of sleep paralysis, which is like when your body is asleep and your mind isn't. And it can be really frightening, but at this point it's actually just exhausting, because I sometimes when I wake up, especially if I slept during the day, I have 5 or 6 false awakenings in a row, which is when you're sleeping and then you think you wake up, but it turns out you're dreaming. And so then you're like, okay, I have to wake up again. So you keep trying, and it keeps seeming like you actually woke up, but you're not. You're still in a dream, or you're in a dream within a dream within a dream. And what happens with this is by the time you wake up, you're actually really exhausted. So that's the main thing that I suffer from now, is that sleeping is sort of a weird thing for me. When I fall asleep, I might feel like I'm dying or like my heart is stopping or sinking. And then if I try to take a nap during the day, I will probably get sleep paralysis falling asleep, which sometimes I get buzzing sensations, levitating sensations, and then when I go to wake up, I have like these really weird, surreal, exhausting false awakenings. So I've talked to other people who have this sort of situation. A lot of times it goes hand in hand with stress, and a lot of like a couple of my friends have that same sort of I always feel like I'm gonna die sort of sensations. So while my boyfriend went through death anxiety, I kind of ended up this thing where I thought I was actively dying, which was weird that it was so stressful, because it's like I'm not afraid of death, but your body doesn't want to die, so when you think that you're dying all the time, it's just really stressful. So if there's anybody else who's going through this, I promise you're okay. Go to the doctor, learn what you need to do, but a lot of times it just takes time to heal it. As far as the hypnagogia, I don't know, I'm still in that mess. So I'm kind of tired all the time. And I do still have an aversion to like extreme stress. Like right now I would not go outside and just run. Like not only because I wouldn't run very far because I'm out of shape, but because I would be afraid that my heart would explode. It's not as bad, the fear isn't as bad as it used to be, but it's still there. And I've had hypnosis, I've had pranic healing sessions, I have had actually 2 bouts of hypnosis, as far like in an attempt to treat these fears. Seeing the hypnotist that I had seen before and who had done pranic healing on me before was more successful. I saw a separate pranic healer before, and that was less successful. It was actually really good. He did relieve a lot of physical sensations, but the fear it's me, and I have to deal with that on my own. So I just kind of want to let you all know that everybody's going through their own things in life, but if I could be an example, that doesn't have to mean that you can't hold on. You don't have to lose it. You can pull yourself together and you'll be able to get through it. It just takes time. Just know that time does heal all wounds. Time has just been the biggest factor in me getting over the anxiety that I was dealing with. And I don't know, there's not much more else to say without going off on a tangent, but I hope you enjoyed Neko Bus. And as an aside, if you like super cute movies, I would suggest watching My Neighbor Totoro, because it's adorable. Anyway, ciao.